I am delighted that all of you have joined us for this really crucial conversation, navigating the nuances of money and mission.
Mm.
It's something every one of us face, and it's complicated, right? There's layers to to this conversation, and there's difference of opinions as well. And actually, Tom Shed, you were one of the reasons why we're doing this. You've
I'm
expressed a,
sorry.
yeah, no, no, no. You've expressed a real interest in this topic, and you and I have had several conversations over the years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, looking forward to jumping into it. Uh, this is what I'm hoping will happen over the next hour. By God's grace, we will learn three things. One, when good intentions are not good enough. Secondly, when funding is appropriate or not. And then third, principles to guide our funding decisions. Now, that's a very ambitious agenda. And so let me pray. Father, would you lead us? Lord, there are th- this is complicated, and there's lots of different opinions about this, Lord. And I pray that you would just give us a rich conversation, Lord, and would you increase our wisdom regarding missions and money? We commit this time to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, let me begin by asking this question. What scripture should shape our thinking about our use of money in our mission work? What are some scriptures that come to mind?
I'm not sure about all of the references, but I know there is definitely scriptural commands to care for our families, to take care of our families, and then to be generous and to be good stewards of our money.
Hmm. Great. Thanks, Becca. Someone else.
Corinthians 8, you think of the Church of Macedonia, out of poverty, they gave abundantly, not just to their local church, but to the church. They had a mindset to give, and they gave themselves first to the Lord. They gave generously, prayerfully, all the,
Hmm.
and even in chapter 9, just filled with lots of biblical giving
Yeah.
principles
Yeah,
in
that's
Second
great.
Corinthians. Yeah.
Yeah. And then one of those Macedonian churches was Philippi. And Paul, in chapter 4, talks about how grateful he is for their support over and over again. And yet, in some ways, he says, but it's not. In fact, let me read this. No other church entered into partnership with me in giving and receiving except you only. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that increases to your credit. Have received full payment and I'm well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. And so on one hand, Paul is exceedingly grateful. And then on the other hand, he says, yeah, but that's not really the money isn't the important part, right? It's what it demonstrates. It's our koinonia, our partnership in the gospel. Good. Any other scriptures that come to mind?
I'm thinking about Luke chapter 18, where Jesus is telling the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. And the one who had greater was unconcerned about the needs of the one who had great need.
Hmm.
And so I think for me, that's something that's been brewing in me is saying, I need to make sure that my generosity extends as the people who've been given much, much is required.
Hmm.
I don't want to be the rich guy. Um, I want to make sure that I'm living generously, but I want to do that with wisdom, shrewd as a snake. And
Right.
that's the challenge, correct?
Yes, and that's what we're trying to navigate this very morning. Good, good. One other scripture that comes to my mind is this one, and you're all familiar with this from 1 Timothy chapter 6. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. That's just a powerful exhortation, isn't it? To the rich. And of course, by global standards, all of us would fit into that category, wouldn't we? So there's clearly a biblical emphasis on generosity, on caring for one another. We just can't escape that. So then let me ask this question. I'm gonna, when are good intentions not good enough? What do you think? How would you respond to that? When are good intentions not good enough?
Well, I think the passage in First John about if you see your brother in need and you have the means to meet that need and don't do it, then the love of God is not in us.
Mm,
So, good intentions aren't necessarily enough because if we are able to meet a need, we should do that.
okay, good. Thanks, Kurt.
Another thought that came to mind on this in the scriptures part is when the disciples were kind of chastising Jesus about wasn't he going to go out and meet all the needs? And he said, the poor will always be with you, but I will not always be with you. Kind of indicating that there is a balance to be had.
Mm,
in my mind. So-
okay, thanks.
And along with that, and I'm sure you would agree, is just because there is a need and just because we can provide that need doesn't mean we should meet it. There are times that
Mhm.
possibly that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, good.
And
Good.
therein lies the biggest problem because
Exactly.
how do we know?
Yes, discerning, right?
Right.
And so we'll be talking about some of that in a moment. Anyone else? When is when are good intentions not good enough?
Craig, I'll share something.
Yes.
This isn't based on a biblical passage or anything. It's just a real world story. My uncle was a part of a short term missions team, and they installed some wells somewhere in Africa. I can't remember. It was in Kenya, and so they got the wells going. It was great. The community needed water. That was wonderful. They went back several times, and on one of the return trips, the well wasn't working. Something about the machinery, and they asked him why didn't you fix the well? And according to him, what they said was, well, this is the white man's well. He can fix it. So great intention of providing water to the community, but they didn't own it. They felt like it wasn't theirs. And
Wow.
so it didn't end up being a sustainable solution.
That's a powerful example. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that example, Paul, I had a good friend who worked with pastors, I think, in Malawi, and one of the pastors was traveling a lot, and so they bought him a bicycle. And so a good intention and helpful, but it created all kinds of jealousy amongst the other pastors. And so they all wanted a bicycle. And why did he get a bicycle? And, and I guess in our perspective, a bicycle is kind of a meaningless or a throwaway thing. I have one out back right now that's ready to just get taken to the thrift store because no one's riding it. And so I think sometimes we don't understand culturally what money and the value of things is different.
Yeah.
And so that can lead to problems within the church, I think.
Wow. I think you and Paul have been reading my notes, so I don't know how you got them.
Well, Steve Saint wrote a book several years ago called The Great Omission. And it was a
Mm,
story of him going back to uh, the Indian tribe. And Mackay, the guy he ended up traveling with, said, "You have turned us into a welfare nation because you have
mm,
everything." And then you've,
wow.
and that's what
Wow.
caused Steve to develop that. I don't know if you saw that little chair that you can fold up and put on your back and go into the bush. And he took several of the Indians, and it was a birthing chair, it was a dental chair, and he trained them how to do those things
Hmm.
so that they had, once again, ownership.
Wow, 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 wow. Let me share three thoughts on when good intentions aren't good enough. One is if it divides the church
Mm.
or undermines her leaders. Um, and this can happen in several ways. The bicycle example is a beautiful one. Um, we can give money to the wrong person. Figuring out the leadership map in a particular context can be really tricky. And one of the struggles I've had is if there's someone in the group that speaks pretty good English and relates pretty well to me, I say, oh, they must be a leader. They must be a group leader. Well, maybe yes, but maybe no, right? Um, do we take the time to understand what is the leadership map? Because if we give money to the wrong person, it gives them power and it can, be a destabilizing factor. So that would be one. Actually, I had a bicycle example from Zaire, just like yours, Eric. Um, yeah, and yeah, it can create these questions. Where did this money come from? Who are you beholden to? Oh, you're probably a Western puppet, right? And it it can actually harm the people we're trying to help. Um, I, or if all of a sudden a leader has resources and starts buying stuff, for the church or for ministry, but it raises a question. Oh, you have a hidden income stream. Where did that come from? What's going on here? And as Eric said, it can create jealousy, greed. I'll never forget. I was in Papua New Guinea, and Anton was one of the leaders there. We were at he was a Bible teacher, and we were on the campus of a Bible college. And I noticed he traveled a lot around Papua New Guinea, and he traveled with his clothes in these plastic bags. And so I said to him, "Hey, I've got this old suitcase with me. Can I give it to you? I'd love to give it to you. So when you travel." And he said, "That'd be great. Would you walk it over to my house, which was just, 50 yards, 100 yards away?" And I felt, what? Well, of course, I'm happy to do that, but why would that be? Well, it was for this very reason, so that everyone on campus would know that this was a gift freely given to him rather
Mm.
than one that he took inappropriately, that sort of thing. So, yeah, so our funding can be harmful if it ends up dividing the church and or undermines her leaders. It can be harmful if it leads to fraud or misuse of funds, right? Someone came up with this phrase. I don't remember who it was. A vacuum of temptation. Have you heard that phrase? Uh, Money can be a huge temptation if there's a vacuum of temptation, meaning poverty can lead often to feelings of hopelessness and shame, and it creates a vacuum inside of a person, an empty space. And if money all of a sudden enters their life, it can fill that vacuum in a really unhealthy way. So, yeah. And of course, we've all heard stories of where funds get redirected. They're given for one purpose and they get redirected in a different way. that's challenging. One really good practice that I've learned is not to give money to individuals, but to the organization, right?
Mm.
In-country organization that has some structure, some accountability. Now, the exception to that would be, of course, if you're giving a personal gift to someone to help with their daughter needs an operation. The Lord may lead you to give money to help with that operation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about for the ministry purposes. Uh, Avoid giving to individuals and rather give through, denominations or other in-country organizations.
But Craig, even
Yeah,
with the example you just used of like for a surgery for someone's daughter,
right.
um, I think it would be wise to try to give to like the local denomination or church they're involved in to say, to coordinate gifts for needs through
Hmm.
the church if it's possible.
Hmm. What do you all think about that?
I don't know. If we didn't have a relationship with that church, um, necessarily, but did have a relationship with that person, um, I don't know.
And would the
Hmm.
church give the money?
Right.
Hmm.
Hate to even.
Yeah, yeah, I would. I don't know that I would do that, Craig, simply because you don't know that that money is going to go where you want it to go if you
Hmm.
give it to
Hmm.
the organization. I mean, that sounds like such a negative thing to say, but
Yeah.
my experience has been that it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily go where you want it to go. And it might be better to give to the individual. But Craig, tell me why you feel giving to the individual would be harmful.
Oh, I just think it creates temptation. It creates uh, there's less accountability if you're giving to an individual, where if you give it to the an organized in-country nonprofit or a denomination, then you've
Mm.
got layers of accountability, at least some accountability.
Yeah,
One
I
of the
think
things we
Go
did
ahead.
we were in Cambodia, and a little 8-year-old girl drowned in the
Hmm.
rice fields, and it was just a real horrifying thing. But we were teaching, we paused, we prayed, but then we brought up the idea, let's pool some money together to help the family during this time. And so, but we got everybody involved, and then we had a trusted person that we worked with, and then we followed up with how they used the money. But that brought, even in the midst of a very difficult thing, we're partnering together. It's not just the white people that are coming in to give
Mhm.
money, but we're all doing this together. And it had good results. It was a difficult situation, but it really brought the community together. There were like 40 or 50 pastors that all helped out. I mean,
Mm.
their part was small, ours is a little bigger, but we kind of buried it in with what everybody did. So it wasn't like we're giving that. But involvement from the rest of the people is good.
Mm.
We did a similar thing, Joel, in Myanmar. The group we were training, there was a young guy in the group, and he wanted to get married, but he didn't have the money for the dowry.
Oh.
The two cows or whatever was necessary. And so we decided to take an offering for him, all of us, the trainees and the teachers, and we created a little box with a little slot and said over the next 24 hours, and the same thing. Presumably, most of the money came from us Westerners, but it was a group project, and I think everybody felt like excited about being able to help this young man. So good, good. Here's another time when good intentions aren't good enough. If our funding is going to create unhealthy dependencies, and what are some examples that you've seen where that has happened? Unhealthy dependency. What does that look like?
I have an interesting thing. We've been working in Burundi, and we were talking about church planting because I'm always talking about church planting no matter what I'm teaching. And so we had this discussion about church planting, and I asked him, I said, how are churches planted in Burundi? And immediately one guy stood up and he said, white people come and plant them. And
Hmm.
everybody gave the nod of assent. The whole room at
Hmm.
once said, we're poor. We can't do this. And
Hmm.
so it created a paradigm that the people feel disempowered, and so are giving, or at least the giving of other people beforehand, had created a culture that says you can't do it on your own.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
uh, and so I think we have to be really careful. Are we creating something like that? And especially if we're working with American Western churches that want to work with people, they feel great about saying we just built the building for these folks, and it really could be toxic.
Glenn Schwartz has written a book, When Charity Destroys Dignity.
Hmm.
Mm.
And he would argue, I've got a quote here, never do for others what they can and should do for themselves. And yeah, church planting needs to be, I mean, it's not wrong for us to do church planting, but it needs to be done by indigenous church as well, right? So yeah, I remember the first mission trip I ever took was to with my church to St. Croix, Virgin Islands, and we re-roofed a church there. We had a missionary there that we supported, and meanwhile, all the church members, they had they just watched us day in, day out, re-roof their church. And afterwards I thought, oh, what's wrong with this picture? So yeah. Um, yeah, we just we don't want to take away their initiative to give, to lead, to innovate, right? Yeah. Glenn Schwartz gives an example of he was helping African believers catch a vision for mission and for church planting, actually. So this will go right along with what you were talking about, Chuck. And he was encouraged. You can make a difference. For Matthew 28, you can be part of that. And so one year they raised $45. And that was enough to be able to plant a church nearby. And they were excited. The next year they raised $61. And oh, praise God. Well, this young, idealistic gal from the States came over as part of a mission team. And she saw this, she heard about this, and she said, oh, and her heart got broken. And she came home and she depleted her entire savings, $6,800, and sent it so that the churches could do more church planting in Africa. Only it didn't work that way. The churches then said, instead of asking, how can we plant more churches? They said, oh, how can we get more money that way? More of that kind of money. And it actually deflated the church planting efforts. So, yeah, let me share a screen again. Yeah, so funding can be harmful if it divides the church, undermines their leaders, if it leads to fraud or misuse of funds, or if it creates unhealthy dependencies. So, given that, here are some questions that I would argue would be good for us to ask ourselves as we think about it, use of funds and ministry. What does that look like? And the first one is this: how might this funding cause harm? You're all familiar with the Star Trek directive, right? The prime directive: do no harm. And I think that's good for us in ministry as well. That ought to be our starting point. And one of the questions under this, how might funding cause harm? Will it deflate their sense of agency? And we've been talking about that, right? Um, our partners have been infected by, many of them, by colonialism, which has inbred a sense of fatalism, nothing can change, or passivity. So why bother? Only outsiders can fix things, per Paul's example of the well. And so will our funding deflate their sense of agency, of ability to actually make change? I think that's an important question. Related to that, on the flip side, will it inflate our sense of agency? You say, well, what do you mean? Well, I think we've been impacted by colonialism as well. And I love David Liverman writes this: not all Africans are starving and waiting for heroic Westerners to come and save them. And when I was a kid, I had many, many dreams that were hero dreams, where I was the hero. And we like being heroes, right? It feels good to be to be the savior. And but I think our money and the power that we have coming from the United States, coming with all our technology, all of our education, all of that is power, right? In a sense. And I think it can subtly create in us a sense of superiority, right? And I mean, we hate that, right? Hmm. Dwayne Elmer in Cross Cultural Conflict says superiority cloaked in the desire to serve is still superiority. Ouch. Ouch. William Easterly wrote a book called The White Man's Burden. He says this: discard your patronizing confidence that you know how to solve other people's problems.
Hmm.
Isn't that something? Oh, so I think funding can actually harm us as well. It can create a sense of power and control that's probably not very healthy. Let me stop there. I'm pushing you here with these thoughts. React? What are you thinking?
One of the things, Chuck, that mentioned about planting churches and, the small dollar amounts versus the big dollars that we can give,
Mm-hmm.
that also impacts their expectation of what do we mean by a church? Does a church mean a big building?
Ah,
Does it mean
good.
people on staff? Does it mean, lots of, decorations? Does it mean lots of hymnals written, up in fancy books? We project our notion of the solution onto their culture. And it not only affects them right then, but so the effect, that Chuck was mentioning, or that you mentioned with that person who gave a whole bunch of money for a church, it hurts the next generations and the next generations. And so
Mm,
we're suffering now from some of those previous
mm,
generous donations because that has become the expectation for us.
good. Yes. Yes.
Craig, there's also the aspect of it undermining the local economy.
Yes. Thank
I've
you. Go
got
ahead.
that. I've got that situation right now in Kenya where one of my staff is a doctor. She's an eye doctor. And she said that recently some Westerners came in with boxes of used eyeglasses and began to distribute them. And she said, I appreciate that, but nobody's buying my glasses now. And so
Mm,
her business has been really adversely affected
Mm.
by this seemingly very generous, effort on the part of people outside of her economy. And that reminds me of that book that when I joined GTN, we were required to read, which is When Hurting Help, or When
when
Helping
helping
Hurts.
hurts. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And there's an American missionary who's now back at home, but he was in Uganda, who wrote with a Kenya pastor partner a follow-up to that, which was a workbook to try to help people understand this idea of creating, like you say, these dependencies and essentially undermining the
Mm,
ability of people to make their own way. And that's you're right, a function of colonialism that we still have to live with, but somehow we've got to change it. So
mm.
anyway.
Good. 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 How might this funding cause harm? Money so often leads to broken relationships, doesn't it? Especially if it's too much money. Um, think of the lottery, lottery winners here in the States, right? They all of a sudden they've got $48 million. And you hear the horror stories of their lives just get blown up. I remember hearing about one baseball player that when the salaries really started accelerating in Major League Baseball, he got some huge contract, and someone asked him, "Well, how has this changed you? You know, all this money?" And his response was, "Well, it hasn't changed me, but it's changed my friends."
Hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. So here's another question to ask. Do we have a true partnership and genuine alignment? And what do I mean by that? Why are they saying yes to us? Is this ministry that we're offering really a priority for them? Or are they simply saying yes because it's a connection to the West and maybe future resources as well? Um, yeah. Uh, what do they want to do? What do they believe is priority? So why are they saying yes? And who's setting the agenda? And this is related, right? Are they full partners with us? Or are we kind of running the show and they're just tagging along saying, yes, 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 that sounds great. Um, Anton from Papua New Guinea told me this. He said, I am a leader. Respect me. Don't take over. Don't compete with my leadership. And so, yeah, is there true partnership? Is there really alignment in the mission or not? I think that's something we need to be really have our ears attuned to as we establish new partnerships with folks around the world. Is money the most important resource? And of course, that's a rhetorical question, right? Of course, it's not. But we need to celebrate what our partners bring to the partnership. Uh, Mary Letterleitner has written Cross-Cultural Partnerships, and she relayed a story that I just found heartbreaking. One of her, she was in a PhD program, and one of her African colleagues said this, Mary, why do Americans act like because you are providing the money, you are bringing the most valuable thing, and you should be able to call all the shots? He says, look at me. Say I am willing to take my family, endure the dangers and the hardships of living in a slum in Nairobi so people can come to Christ. My family is in danger. My health is in danger. Daily, I work exceedingly long hours, but my body has a natural resistance to malaria, so I'm better equipped than you to serve in that place. I know the language, I know the culture, and so I can experience fruitful outcomes in ministry more quickly. Why, in light of these contributions, is money viewed as the most valuable resource? I think the person putting their life and the lives of their family members on the line should be more valued than that. And so just a reminder, and I think we need to keep reminding ourselves and our partners that money isn't the most important resource. And what they bring to the partnership, we just need to continue to elevate, because I think money can take a disproportionate place in a partnership and create some distortions that aren't helpful. Any comments, questions, thoughts on that?
Yeah, Craig, I was thinking it's also true going the other direction, that they can believe that money is the most important thing.
Yes.
One of the questions I ask as a ministry partner developer who raises money so that I can do what I do is one of the questions I'm asking of the leaders I'm working with is, are they doing ministry partner development through me? You know, is that ultimate, as you were saying, why are they saying yes? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an important
Mm-hmm.
question to ask and to keep asking is the long game really that they're not really needing training or desiring training, but they're hoping that that will help put a roof on the, you know, in the building or something.
Right, right. Great example.
We have a Cambodian host that he's a businessman, but also a pastor. And he always asks the Cambodian pastors, what do you have in your hands?
Hmm.
Talking about the 5 loaves and 2 fish. So he's always looking for them do with the little that you have to bring about the purposes. But it creates that partnership. But when you have the host in a country encouraging that, you're just a step ahead. And we found that to be really successful.
That's great. Yeah. So that's, I think, a critical role for us, right, is to continue to champion and celebrate what they bring to the party, if you will.
Greg, one of the difficult things too is, as you mentioned, is to determine if somebody is inviting you to do training in their location because not really they want to train people, although they probably do, but really they want you to fund their project, whatever it is. And so if they invite you to come, then they have a connection with you whereby they can get money. And I've seen that happen a couple of times, and it's so discouraging. But when you recognize that that was really why they invited you, it boy, it's very hard not to get angry. At least it is for me.
Yeah. And it kind of comes to this fourth point I just put up on the screen. Have we moved beyond a transactional relationship to a trusted friendship? And that just takes lots of cups of tea, right? To talk, to get to know each other, to learn a person's heart. And we won't always get it right, like you said, Tom. But yes, and I think this argues for going slowly and just building the relationship, building the trust, and yeah, and as the more time you spend with someone, the more their heart becomes exposed, and the more our hearts get exposed as well. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
How do we communicate the damage that money has in the American church? Because I think sometimes the assumption is that, American churches are healthy because they have money. And as a pastor, I've at least observed in my own ministry that oftentimes money has created more division, more problems, more issues, and has been used often to promote bad theology, bad gospels, bad ministry things. We just recently just heard of a church that spent Sunday morning promoting one of the pastors to be elected to or running for office and start campaign raising. And, in other words, there's this kind of idea that how do we be honest about the fact of how money has negatively impacted our own churches and our own lives, instead of that we're holding back something. Trust them, but actually we all have experienced, maybe I'm alone, but I've just experienced money as being problematic wealth, and doing crazy campaigns and spending money on wild and crazy things. We don't want to duplicate all the bad stuff that the American church does in other places. I don't know how to communicate that, or is it something that we communicate?
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
It's a hard question.
Yeah.
I think
But,
several.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Francie, go ahead.
I think sometimes telling stories about on ourselves about mistakes that we've made and what damage has been done in instances like that can help not only build relationships but help them to see that we don't have all the answers and that there are other ways to do things. I also think it's important to let the people that we're working with know how much it's costing us to be there, because they don't have any idea, and for the most part, of the cost. And to say, I'm raising funds from people, in our churches and people we know in order to be able to come, because I can't afford to do this without partners who join me in this mission. And I'm responsible to them, to let them know what we're doing and what we're spending money on, and responsible to you to let you know that these people are partnering with us and that we need to both be acting with integrity so that we can continue the partnership.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, to your point, Francie, I think at least for me, that's one of the things that we've tried to develop too, is to say we want you to know we're fully committed to you. We don't have extra money to do roofs or to, that kind of a thing because we are all in, we're fully committed, and we want you to know that we represent, hundreds sometimes of people who give because you are loved.
Mm.
And so with that, we can see all the many needs. We probably can't really help with most of those, but we're fully committed to you. And the other piece to your question, Craig, for me, I pastored for a long time, like probably everybody here, but I really, I swam in the swimming pool of pastoral ministry, local church ministry. I didn't swim in the pool of international missions. I would look at it and I would throw some money in there, but I didn't swim in it. But we swim in that. This is our world. So it's incumbent on us, I think, also to be training the pastors of the churches that we work with and even key leaders that might go with us to understand when helping hurts or several really good books have been mentioned. I hadn't read any of those when I was in pastoral ministry. I wasn't aware of any of these things, and we kept crashing in the same cars. We hurt somebody, we hurt ourselves because I didn't know these things. So I think it maybe as specialists in this area, we could pick a great book like cross-cultural partnerships is really good. I'm just reading that right now. And go to I've got a good friend who's a pastor who really needs to read that book. And so I'm going to say, I never ask you to read a book. Would you read this book and, call back in 2 months and tell me what you learned from it or what you thought? I think might help churches from creating more of this culture.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So we have a ministry not only to our overseas partners, but to our local partners as well here.
Mhm.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen once again. So we've looked at a question, how might the funding cause harm? Do we have a true partnership and genuine alignment? And then one more question I'd like to suggest. Will this funding help build both their capacity and their sustainability? And I think one question asked is, what will the ministry look like after I'm gone? None of us are going to be there long term, right? We've got a limited shelf life, and so what will the ministry? Does it die after we're gone? What can we be doing now to help build in capacity and sustainability? And part of that is that they own it. We've used this language already this morning. Help them own it and operate it. Glenn Schwartz says this. This is what we want. Quote, this is ours. Our global partner saying this. This is ours. It belongs to us. We are going to take charge of it and make it work. We're going to manage it with our own decisions, structures, and resources. Right? That's what we want to be driving towards, right? Is that level of depth of ownership. And I think we have a role to play in that, as we cast vision, as we keep pushing decisions off of ourselves onto them, and so on. Yeah, we can give them too much money, can't we? And I just was meeting with a donor this week actually, and he said he helped fund a orphanage in India. And he said to me, "I'm never going to do that again." And I said, "Why not?" Because you have to feed those kids, you have to clothe those kids, you have to make sure they go to school day after day after day. And so just building a building doesn't create for a sustainable situation. Um, the other thing is often one-time gifts. Um, Sustainability takes time, right? You don't become sustainable with a one-time gift. Boom, here you go. The, sustainability takes trial and error, practice, mid-course adjustments, and that sort of thing. And are we creating the space and the time for that to happen as well? Um, and and then I think related to this is, are we willing to give up control? Right? We want our partners to run with it. We want them I remember I was in Brazil, and our Brazil partner was meeting with our Brazil coordinator from the States. And I was just in this meeting, just kind of flying the wall, listening to their conversation. And I started laughing to myself because I realized we'd had maybe a 10-year partnership with this partner. And I realized, oh my, we are the junior partners in this partnership. They're going, they're running with it. And I rejoice because that's exactly what we want to happen. And so are we willing to give up control? I'll never forget Shadrach, who was a key church leader in the Solomon Islands. He said to me, when white people come, they tell us what to do. Wow. When white people come, they tell us what to do. And so I think this question, will our funding help build their capacity and their sustainability? And I think that ought to be a conversation we're having on an ongoing basis with our global partners. Somebody mentioned When Helping Hurts. One of their major points in that book is focus on people and process, not programs and products. I thought that was great. Well, let me remind you what we were hoping to do today, and then we'll just wrap things up. By God's grace, we were hoping to learn when good intentions aren't good enough, when funding is appropriate or not, and a few principles to guide our giving. What are your takeaways from today or further reflections?
I like Francie's idea of sharing our mistakes with each other. Discussion time. I learned so much. I mean, I've made so many mistakes. I've been with GTN 20 years, and I still make mistakes. But being able to share, the outcome that I expected didn't happen, being able to share and learn from each other would be a wonderful thing.
That's great. Thanks, Joel. Someone else.
I have a question, Craig. Just being new, maybe this is for Joel after 20 years. How do you live with the difficulty that your standard of living as an American is very different than the people that you serve with, and that it's difficult to understand? So one of our local leaders, I had asked, we have a Facebook page. Is that a problem? He says, it's not a problem. Don't accept any friends, from Bangladesh, because they can't understand the way that Americans live. In other words, they don't have retirement. They're not putting away insurance for, so when they come up and say, we need, $100 for this surgery, it's very difficult as a Western to go, well, I don't really have it. I mean, I did just spend $1,500 for insurance that I'm not going to use, just in case I get hurt. But you know what I mean? Like, there is that. It's very hard to know where that limiting principle is. If I want to help, but where do I stop if I give it to this person and not that person? And how do I live in that space of I'm putting away for retirement while I'm also serving people who, are wondering where next month's rent is going to come from.
Eric, those are great questions. What do y'all think? How each of us have to navigate this, right? I mean, we have so much more wealth than the partners that we work with. How do you navigate that, and in your own heart and mind?
I think there's been this dynamic tension in my life, this tension between what we have and what they don't have. And being able to navigate that, I find that the two extremes of wanting to give everything, not wanting to give anything, with when helping hurts, really pushed me to that. But I came across a book called Giving Wisely by Jonathan Martin that gave guidelines for how to give and to do that. But the goal for me, Eric, I don't know if there's a good answer for this, but it's just keeping my heart tender towards the people who are around me, putting myself in their position. What are they dealing with? We are different, but then it creates, just a humility in my own heart of saying, gosh, Lord, I'm born here. I wasn't born in Bangladesh. How do we navigate that? And how should that flesh itself out when I do go? But I think that'll be an ongoing tension that we'll have to deal with our whole life.
Yeah.
Just because it's so radically different.
I mean, theologically, the other piece for me is God sovereignly put me where he put me. Acts 19, he placed us in time and space. And so I want to be a person who lives with gratitude and not guilt. And I also, gosh, there are three G's. I hate alliteration, but here comes the sermon, I guess. I really don't like alliteration, but I do want to live with gratitude instead of guilt. But I also want to live with generosity. And so for me, there's a thing of saying I need to look at each request, and there are many. I'm sure you all have. I wake up every morning, I think, with text from somebody going, from Dilly or somebody, and so I have to prayerfully say, Lord, I have the ability to be generous because He's been generous with me, but I have to be wise about where I say yes based on our conversation when helping hurts and all. One thing that we are developing, or we've developed in our budget, is we've got a bucket in our budget that's called instant generosity. And so we have a budget for, and I'm sure other people have thought of this. I'm not smart, so I just figured it out at 66. What if we have, over and above our normal giving, what if we have a bucket that we always put money in, so there's always money for instant generosity when we're on the field or when we come home? And so that's been really helpful because I know, like you were saying, Eric, I mean, we have to save for retirement because of what it's going to cost us to live at some point when we're no longer working. They won't understand that. But if I have money earmarked for that, I can almost always say yes. So
I think those are really good points, and just being sensitive to the Holy Spirit of where he directs you, um, and keeping all those things in mind, with like when helping hurts, and that we live here. God had us be born here and not somewhere else. But I think part of a hard thing for me has been over the years not to become judgmental to people I see around me who are, you know, getting new kitchen appliances, even though their old ones all work fine, and things like that. Because I often say, if I had that $10,000, I could buy 10,000 Bibles, and distribute them, you know. So trying, it's hard work to not become judgmental when you when you see waste, that happens. And I think you need some help in being grounded in that, when you come back. And part of our responsibility is to help educate people around us in the United States, where we live in this tremendous abundance of what God could do with even a small amount of money to minister to people around the world. So we need to help them understand that without preaching, without being holier than thou, but just help educate them that what God could do with even a small amount.
Greg, I'm committed to the principle of having a fee for all of our trainings, because I believe that people value the things that they pay for, and they pay for the things that they value. And so it's important to me that there be a sense of ownership on the part of the participants, that they see that this is something that they need to do. And I always get resistance to it. But once we have established the principle, then we find that it's understood, and it's expected that there will be a fee. That's not very big. It's never very big, but it also uh, influences the ability of those who we train to then go out and train others, where we have a methodology established so that there will be a fee for them. And they will be able to say, hey, I had to pay a fee, and I was there with the American Mzungu. And so, if there is this expectation, then that this is the way we do it, I think it's helpful, because it encourages the second generation to go out and do training, because there's a way to make it happen where they don't have to pay for it, because they can't. They don't have the resources that we have. They can't pay for all the printed manuals and everything. So there has to be some way that this training is self-sustaining to the second and third generation. So in our methodology, we have established that. And one of the things that is difficult is when other GTN members in the same region don't have that, and they come in and pay for everything. It creates this horrible dissonance on the part of the participants in the training, because they say, hey, well, wait a minute, why are you making us pay when this guy comes in and he pays for everything? And so that creates a great tension. And I wish that there was a way to solve that. I wish that, perhaps we could establish a general GTN policy, but I know that that's impossible, because the philosophy of GTN is to allow freedom for each of us to do it the way we feel the Lord wants us to do it. But I confess that it creates a great difficulty. So, but anyway, that's my understanding of the way that we set it up, is this idea that they need to value the training, and the way they do that is having some ownership and participation in it.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Any final thoughts, questions?
I got a couple. Greg, I think that these concepts are absolutely spot on and applicable to what we all do. And oftentimes it's hard to go from the classroom and your notes, and you leave them on your desk, and then you go and do work. So a couple things come to mind of how to reinforce those while you're in those, emotion-filled settings. One is to do what Tom said, and that is to set expectations early. Another is to seek advice from other counterparts that know these concepts, whether they're, GTN people, or your home partners, or even your trusted Indigenous partners, to seek advice on topics. Actually, to seek advice from the Indigenous partners will help understand, what the equivalencies are and what other unexpected consequences might be. And then the last thing is to plan ahead. And actually, Craig, I found that chart that I mentioned to you earlier that I couldn't find.
Yes.
And plan ahead by thinking through, these are the kinds of donation requests I'll always say yes to. These are the things I'll always say no to. These are the things in the middle that I need some type of decision process. And write that down before you go, and have that in your mind when those questions come up. And obviously, be sensitive to the leading of the Spirit, but some of those easy tools can help you when you're in, the moment.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. Yeah. Yeah. I think having built a deep relationship with a trusted partner who can be your cultural guide is just huge, because there's just so much that we don't understand, right? And a trusted cultural guide can really help us navigate these things. Hey, Lance, welcome. We're wrapping up. So I don't know if you had the timing wrong, but anyway, we've had a great conversation. Let me share a couple of resources with everyone. And you'll want to look at the chat box. There are several other resources that are mentioned in the chat box. And so thank you for those. I did a webinar like this a year ago or so, navigating cross-cultural training pitfalls. And money is obviously one of those pitfalls. And so you might want to catch that at my website. And then I've got 3 books, When Helping Hurts, Colbert and Fikert, kind of a classic. Glenn Schwartz, When Charity Destroys Dignity. He was a missionary in Africa, and he would be quite negative regarding Western financing of ministries. So he'd be kind of on one side of the spectrum. And then Mary Lederleitner, she'd be more in I would say, a balanced view of there's definitely times and places for us to be generous, but with these guidelines and so on. So those are some resources that you might want to consider. Hey, thanks everyone. This has been a really rich conversation, and I'm grateful to each one of you. Lord bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. See
You
y'all.
bet.